It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hi, it's Feedback Friday. And yes, I phoned that in. I'm still really struggling with asthma. So if I space or if I ramble more than usual or if I just seem sort of out of it here, I deeply apologize. I am doing my best. I really appreciate the well wishes in the comments this week. I appreciate the people who have been really good about me struggling this week. Sadly, not everyone has been so good about this, but most people have, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also very grateful at the high quality, passionate, well argued, respectful responses overall to the John Kent Superman video. That was some really great commenting. It was some really great overall, really, really, really good back and forth. A lot of diverse opinions argued well. And I'd read one comment and go, that was really well argued. Interesting perspective. And then I'd read a comment that would come down on the exact opposite side of the issue and go, that was really well argued. Good comment. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it can be. Now, in order to do that, I have to get tough sometimes. One person I did warn for comment spamming. Please do not just copy pasta the same comment in responses from multiple people. If you're going to bother responding to multiple people, please make them original comments. Your fellow commenters deserve that much respect. Thank you. I think the person just got over eager, but I did give them a warning. I don't think they intended harm, but I did give them a warning. There was somebody else I did ban outright this week because the thing they did was so over the line, they had to know better. This is somebody who thought they were on the right side of the whole thing, I'm reasonably certain. They thought, I'm going to stand up for LGBTQ rights, right? And they made fun of somebody and basically told them they didn't have the right to an opinion because they're legally blind. That's discrimination. That's dehumanizing. That's belittling someone. And so, insta-ban, no warning, gone. People know better than to do that. And the person who was on the receiving end of the comment is a longtime, very high quality commenter for this channel. I really value them. I value their participation. They have been through some shit of late. They didn't deserve that. I hope, you watching, you know who you are. I'm deeply sorry you had to go through that on my channel. I hope that the, clearly no tolerance action there helped ease that for a bit, because that was bullshit. That is never okay. If you are right, the ends don't justify the means. You're never on the quote unquote right side of history if you are a bully and are picking on someone for something they can't control and doing things you think, it's just an easy mean point, right? That's never okay. No one should use their identity as a cudgel. No one should make anybody deliberately feel less because of something they can't control. Period. End of story. And that's tying in to the Samus Aran thing, right? Best of times, worst of times. Overall, I sat back here with my wheezy ass and went, really, really great discussion. Really great. I wish the naysayers in the gaming industry could see this stuff. They don't want to see this stuff because they are in the Kotaku echo chamber where it's do as I say, not as I do. There have been a spate of articles like this. Remember when I talked about the Far Cry 6 article that Kotaku put out by a, self-professed Christian white boy from Kansas who was talking about Latin depictions in a game? Well, they've done it again with depictions of women and what is an acceptable emotional spectrum for a female character to display. I'm hesitant to get into this, and I don't even remember if I did the Patreon thing. Patreon's got a sneak preview of the boss fight stuff. I don't know if I said that. Remember I said if I space. I'll do it at the end. because I want to get into the meat of this thing. Okay, here's the article. Dear Metroid Dread, Samus doesn't need to be an emotionless robot to be a badass. First of all, can you please have a headline that doesn't sound like a snarky... Never mind. I'm not going to read all of this article because it's written on the premise that a week is ample time to play a game and then post massive, massive spoilers. There's a spoiler tag, yes, but I can't read more than the first 3 paragraphs without doing a spoiler. And this hastily written, poorly argued, needed an editor thing someone got paid for. It's disposable clickbait. But it does have some like numerous real problems, not only in just like critical thinking, but also, holy shit, how many times do we have to say that men should not be weighing in this way on what is an acceptable feminine response? What do I mean by that? All right. The summary of this article is that it's a Smile More article. Samus Aran is stoic. She is also kind of cryptic. She has never had, except in Metroid Other M, big emotional responses to things. It is part of her character. It is what she's always been. And basically this male writer at Kotaku is saying, I didn't like it this time. Now, maybe I'm assuming something about the author, the name, but, you know, proceed with caution. If a woman argued this, it would be wrong. Somebody with a masculine performing name, it is worse, just because they don't have the experience of being a woman. They don't have the experience of being not a proper victim, which is basically what the argument is here now. I don't think it's as much a Smile More thing as a not a proper victim thing. And again, this is really difficult to talk about without major spoiler. It's not worth the spoiler. Basically, at a critical moment, this person from Kotaku is arguing that it's a big OMG moment and Samus doesn't react in the way the writer thinks she should. It is not enough emotion. And they actually praise Metroid Other M of at least she showed a response. This is not only, let's face it, nobody complains that Joel in The Last of Us barely showed that much open emotion when crazy shit was going on around him. These arguments usually aren't made with male characters the way they're made with female characters. But also it shows a profound lack of understanding of human psychology. There are 3 reactions to shocking events: freeze, fight, or flight. Most people just know fight or flight. If you watch Wellness Wednesday, you know I talk about that it is freeze, fight, or flight. And a lot of people just freeze. So a lack of a response, a lack of a response here doesn't mean there isn't a response going on in here, right? Somebody inside can be, but it doesn't show. I'm one of those people. I've, been a professional performer since I was 12 years old. It's sort of a reverse masking thing. I have been conditioned to not react in the moment the way a lot of people would. Because you can't when you're being heckled on stage or when you're being, when you're performing, you have to just go on with what you're doing. And a lot of first responder jobs, a lot of people who, I'm not saying acting's dangerous, like being a cop or a firefighter or something like that, but people in dangerous jobs, people who have had conditioning because of their jobs, don't fall apart. in moments like that. They may show almost absolutely nothing because that's their job. And so to me, I find it more interesting that Samus would have a response suited to what she actually does as an individual, not female character. Make her more interesting by making her more emotional, right? It's not treating her as an individual, right? It's not. It's she's a woman, therefore she's supposed to react that way. We can go home right there, right? But let's unpack what this does, right? Let's talk about the acceptable spaces for women in gaming and what something like this being published does. First of all, it's just it was I am trying to not give this piece of writing more credit than it's due because it has all the markers of just somebody dashing something off because they had to get content up. It's sloppy, it's poorly argued, it's way too much summary. Completely unnecessary. Trying vainly to show some historic knowledge of the character that can be found, in a Wikipedia search. It doesn't mean you've played previous games. It doesn't mean you're a fan. We also have the fact that this is a Japanese game and there's a much greater tradition of what we would call stoic female warriors in Japanese games than Western games. And so basically saying, hey, Japanese game, you're bad because you're not more like a Western game. You're not behaving the way we Westerners think women should behave. That's a terrible argument. Just a commonly known one, Attack on Titan. Would people say, Mikasa doesn't cry enough? Mikasa doesn't seem shocked enough. No, Mikasa's a freaking badass. That's her whole point. And there are tiny moments as that series goes on, some flashbacks that show what she's feeling, but she doesn't show that in those moments, right? It would have been fine if the argument in this Kotaku article was this is inconsistent with Samus's character up until now. But that wasn't what they were arguing, right? This is what they're arguing is this is totally consistent with Samus's character historically, but I don't like it anymore. I wanted to show more emotion, which is where the smile more thing came from, right? And said she's some more warmth in places. This is why. Why should Samus show warmth? What about her indicates that all of a sudden she becomes Aerith from Final Fantasy VII? Or even Tifa. She's not. She's Samus. She's a badass. She's a chicken robot suit. She's a warrior. And this is something that hits home for me because I get criticized all the time for stuff like this. Being uncaring, being dispassionate, not this, because I don't have the typical, oh, that's terrible. I care so much. It ain't me. It's not that I don't care. I just express that caring in a more introverted, systemized thinker way, which is sort of putting things in their place. And so I really take exception for a gaming website criticizing a female character for not being typical enough, especially a character with this backstory where she was never typical. But let's broaden the lens a bit and look at another female property that, how do I put this? I can't say I enjoyed this particular movie for what it did. I did think that it was deliberate what it did, but it was another movie with a strong female movie instead of a game with a strong female character that was deliberately a cipher and had a flattened emotional affect, the Captain Marvel movie. Places like Kotaku fell all over themselves to defend the Captain Marvel movie because they were supposed to, right? But again, they didn't argue it based on what was on the screen. It was strong woman, feminist, good, right? Instead of what I took away from that movie, they deliberately were telling a story about a character who didn't know who she was, and in typical Disney fashion, rewrote the ending to be Pat. But there was an interesting thing where Brie Larson she played her kind of flat, coming in at like 50% a lot of the time with little tiny pops of character because she didn't know who she was. Her background was suppressed from her. This, like I said, was, I think, deliberate. Did it make for as enjoyable a movie? Well, no. You know, you're talking about a movie where Samuel L. Jackson's your co-pilot and you've got a cat alien that eats people. People want a popcorn movie, right? That was just probably wasn't the right choice for $1 billion movie, right? But people were afraid to criticize that just based on expectations. I'm saying it's a deliberate creative choice. I will defend it as a risky creative choice. I really understand why people didn't like it or didn't necessarily recognize what was going on. By the way, I'll say again, can we stop making every female-led Marvel property be a voyage of discovery of who a woman is? Please stop. Too many times. But again, people fell all over themselves to defend a very flat, deliberately, performance in Captain Marvel. And now the usual suspects that defended that are making the exact opposite argument for another female character that for some odd reason they feel some sense of ownership over. And I want to be careful here because, like I defended the response to the Captain Marvel movie where it just didn't work for some people, it was too flat, they're there for the big spectacle and didn't get that in the performance. Okay, cool. Fair. You didn't like it. That's fine. I didn't like it is different than saying it's a mistake. And the Kotaku article crosses that line. You notice again with the Captain Marvel comparison, I'm not saying it's a mistake. It's a deliberate choice that not everyone is going to love. I respect risks personally, but I also understand why lots of people didn't love it. That's not what they're doing with this Samus Aran article on Kotaku. They aren't arguing, look, we get that she's a badass. We need to lower the mask a little bit just to keep people on board. If that were the argument they were making, I'd be like, all right, they're arguing sort of a business and marketing perspective. But they didn't do that. They're arguing this is just a mistake. She doesn't have to be emotionless to be a badass. It's not. I didn't take it as an emotionless moment. I didn't take any of them as emotionless moments. I took it as internal. And I see Samus Aran as an active introvert. And there are not enough depictions of introverted women that aren't stereotypes in media. And I say this as someone who is one and takes shit for it all the time, like I said. So again, tender point for me. But, you know, I am one of those people that in moments where the big theatrical thing would be, oh my God, to care so much. I'm the person who says, that thing, that is not my problem. This is my problem. And that's Samus. Feel bad about it later. Do thing now. Totally, totally, totally valid character choice in the context of these moments. And the only reason that this Kotaku writer found it invalid is because of the character's gender. Because again, how many moments did we get in The Last of Us? Praised game, right? Where Joel's just like, yep, didn't. You know, we have those strong silent type guys who don't react and don't cry and don't show very much. And then you get that little tiny thing. And with Joel, you have to infer his feeling because of the crazy thing he does at the end of the first game, right? We don't get an openly tender moment with Joel until the end of the second fucking game. And that's okay. Because he's an old grizzled veteran male trope. Samus Aran is a grizzled veteran trope. She's a soldier. She's seen some shit. So that response is totally defensible. And to recap here, it's not about the individual opinion of an individual writer at Kotaku. It's that Kotaku, hello kitty, hi Zelda. Kotaku basically serves as an Overton window for the progressive wing of video game thought. If it's on Kotaku, it is seen by developers and by the faux intelligentsia that talk about games as an acceptable opinion. And this is a regressive opinion that there's something wrong with women who are not traditionally openly emotional at the right times for the right reasons, that right kind of victim thing. That's a problem. That Overton window issue is a problem. Twofold. One, not just because it impacts, let's face it, I know my personality type. I know my profile is like a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of the population. It's like 2% of people. All my markers, it's uniquely rare in women. I accept that. But if we associate certain behaviors with a certain gender and we limit the size and breadth of the acceptable emotional spectrum based on gender, we limit both. So if we're normalizing men not showing emotions, then we're penalizing men who do. If we're normalizing women going to pieces because that's the right thing to do, well, we're punishing women who don't have that freeze, fight, or flight response, right? But that much bigger cohort, the indirect, like the secondary demographic, the ricochet on this is the one that actually impacts a lot of people, right? And I think the reason there was such a uproar about this was in part because a lot of people feel a real affinity to Samus Aran just because she is atypical. And it's like we talked about with the John Kent video, people connect to characters who don't necessarily look like them because there's something else they connect with. And, that cipher personality, that inscrutable, that was the word I was looking for more with these female Japanese tropes. That people connect to that as gamers who aren't the typical hyper-masculine, grizzled veteran thing. I have deep Troy Baker voice, so I'm very manly, right? They're not that. They're something else, right? But the limited externalizing of emotion is something they can relate to. And if you shame that, if you basically say the only people who are allowed to act like this are super traditionally manly men and no one else, you're alienating, first of all, you're alienating a huge portion of the player base who ain't the macho manly man. That's why we're gamers. But you're also signaling, because sites like Kotaku are an Overton window, basically, of opinion in gaming, you're making a pretty profound statement about which types of people are acceptable and which types of people aren't. And that's why I think Kotaku needs to be more careful and more responsible with these sort of op-ed pieces, because they can't argue inclusion in every other way. No, don't make anybody feel bad because that's harm. It hurts. And then go after emotionally atypical women, go after non-demonstrative women in this way and say it's bad, say it makes you a less good character because you were inscrutable. First of all, again, it's ignorant of Japanese traditions. And people say, well, it's still a trope. It's still an overused anime trope. Yes, but Samus has always been that trope. And the same reason I argue that Princess Peach should be allowed to be Princess Peach, because she's the archetype in gaming, right? Samus should be allowed to be Samus. It doesn't matter if the trope's been overused in the subsequent years. They were them. Don't make them change because they were copied a bazillion times, right? It's the same argument people were making about why they don't like characters being rewritten in comic books. But I definitely think this is deeper than just good writing, bad writing. This is down to identity. And like I said, what is acceptable for certain people and not acceptable for other people. Now, if, again, this would be a valid criticism if Samus was Samus, right? It would be, okay, somebody in this situation, we probably like to see something more here, maybe more animated face, but Samus is Samus. She's baked in. But Kotaku and the way it scolds the industry is also baked in. And so now we're in it's okay when we do it territory. And obviously that is never a place you want to be as any sort of thinker, as any sort of human being who cares about other humans. But certainly not when you are writing for a site that is the Overton window of video game thought. Because that means it's okay when we do it is normalized. And if you want to address any sort of perceived harassment problem in video games, you can't be okay with it's okay when we do it. And oh, my connection just dropped, and that's why that flashy thing happened. That was interesting timing. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Hopefully that was coherent. Like I said, I'm really, really, really struggling. But hopefully there's some points that you could relate to and add your own points. Like I said, I love dialogue. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Patrons, boss fight Kickstarter preview. Check it out. Thanks for watching.